everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the program Daytime Talk. My name is Emmanuel Erei. Now, various theories have talked about the physical and spiritual reality. For the physical or material, many of us can easily relate with because we can see, hear, smell, feel, as it were. However, the spiritual is also a reality that many may live in denial of, but something that we may not be able to avoid. Now, in medicine, doctors say we treat, but God heals, or we treat and God heals. It may also be a recognition of the fact that there is a supreme authority from whom healing flows. Well, today on the program, we'll be talking about spiritual healing, what it represents, the well-being it produces, and the place of science, if you like. Please stay with us, and let me introduce to us today Mojisola Sholanke. She is of the Church of Christ, scientist. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And we have a medical doctor who would also help us to explain some issues that relate to medicine and the human well-being. Dari Dada, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to start from Mojisola Sholanke of the Church of Christ Scientist. I must say, I find that interesting. Church of Christ with a comma, scientist. Could you explain to us what it represents?
Well, it's a church, and it's based, of course, on the teachings of Jesus Christ. The scientist there is to emphasize the fact that Christianity is practical. It's, because science really means knowledge, and what we know, we must practice. So Church of Christ is...
Okay, I want to ask you before we get on. When you talk about spiritual healing, which you're going to define as we progress, is it just exclusively for those who identify with the Christian faith?
Absolutely not.
Good. All right.
Absolutely
So let's go from there. How do you respond, Dr. Daridada, to the issue of spiritual healing?
The aspect of spiritual healing is classified as alternative medicine. Alternative medicine is simply a way of healing which cannot be scientifically proven, which cannot be explained to someone in the class step by step. So it's actually a big field, and she's actually coning down to that of the Christianity.
No, she said it's not just for Christians. So.
Oh, okay. We talk about the African medicine, talk about Christianity, we talk about other forms of practices all over the world that is actually a bit different from the orthodox medicine. It must be established here that when it comes to medicine, medicine is actually, apart from being scientific, it's stepwise. It can be impacted from one generation to the other, provided an individual has what it takes intellectually to be able to consume the knowledge that is embedded and the challenges that is actually vested in the medical school. So such a person comes out as a doctor. Now, compared to other forms of healing, which may be technically vague, not completely explainable, something that is actually beyond the fifth sense, which you actually introduced with. So that, in actual fact, may not completely explain medicine, which we practice.
Obviously, it doesn't explain medicine which you practice. That's why I would ask Mojisola Sholanke to explain what spiritual healing means.
All right. First of all, in response to what Dr. Dada has said, there is a growing awareness, even within the medical faculty, of the fact that there is an effect that is, evident, even, when a patient is undergoing medical treatment. when they are, when they receive some kind of spiritual healing, that it is beginning to, they're beginning to see that there is a benefit. So I was reading the other day, there's this professor from the University of Northampton who, has done, he's a doctor, but he's done quite a bit of investigation and research on spiritual healing. And he was saying that even though spiritual healing isn't quantifiable physically, the effects show that it would be unscientific to ignore it. That in the past, the medical faculty just assumed that spiritual healing was, hocus pocus. But now they are beginning to, realize that it has to come, to the table of the healthcare debate and be listened to on its own merit.
Okay, so define it now.
All right. Spiritual healing, the one I'm talking about, is healing that is based on God. It starts with God. However, it also starts from the premise, and this is where there may be, a deviation from materia medica, that man is spiritual. And therefore, it is not limited to the Christian faith, or it's not limited to any faith. The basis is that man is spiritual, because made by God, who is spirit. And in a place like Nigeria, where, we readily believe in God, because, in the Western world, maybe, that isn't, maybe there's a dwindling in that belief. But in Nigeria, where we believe in God, most people acknowledge, and, you see Thanksgiving, that, oh, this healing came from God. But what I'm saying is, apart from acknowledging God's healing after going to the hospital, we can rely on him for the actual healing, for the treatment. And
Okay.
that's the difference.
This makes for interesting discussion, because I know that for Dr. Dare Dada, according to, how many years you spent in medical school, you graduated as a medical doctor, and how many years you've practiced, these are not things you've related with, as it were. So how do they sound to you?
Well, in actual fact, because we are in Africa, I cannot pretend as if I'm not aware of what she's talking about.
Okay.
But be that as it may, it is only a foolish man that argue facts. Someone said facts are sacred. Now, when you find someone who come to the hospital, like I heard, someone who had sickle cell anemia and was prayed for by someone, and went back to the lab to check and realized that, it's no longer SS, that I am now AS. That's a miracle. Now, this is where medicine is a bit, when you bring facts, the fact is that I was sick, I was having sickle cell, then I no longer have sickle cell. That's a fact. A wise man doesn't argue fact. But the modus operandi, what happens between when the guy was sick and when the guy is healed. In medicine, that's what we explain what we call pathophysiology. That is the progress of the disease has to be studied before you now bring out the means of curing that disease. Now, if the means of going about with the fact that you are healed cannot be explained, cannot be substantiated, the fact remains that you are healed, you were once sick, you are healed, that's incontrovertible. Now, the aspect is the process that it takes for you to be healed. We don't deny the fact that God exists. Now, another thing that must be a statement of fact is that if you say that you are healed by God and you were once ASS, you are now AS or AA, then the next person in line should be healed almost immediately. Almost immediately. That is where medicine now comes in to say, okay, as is explainable.
Okay,
like
this process is not explained. I noticed that you want to, please don't forget what you're about to say, but I would like you to differentiate between spiritual healing and faith healing? Because I notice that somehow it is used interchangeably.
Yes. In fact, Dr. Dada said something which, brings up what you said. He said, someone who was SS became AS, it's miraculous. What I am talking about is not miraculous. It is something that is certain, something that is reliable, something that is repeatable. And that's where, of course, all healing has to do with faith. But what I am talking about is faith that has become spiritual understanding, a form of healing that can be learned by anyone. Anyone can learn it. It's not a hit or miss. I'm not sure it worked for me, it won't work for another. No, I am talking about a reliable form of healthcare that anyone who wishes, who chooses, can learn how, or go to someone who knows how and be healed. It's not miraculous. It's not faith healing per se, because for faith healing, there's a measure of blindness. And let me use an example. If, to differentiate between what I call spiritual healing and faith healing. If I come into a dark room and I want to switch on the light, and I don't know where the switch is, I fumble. I may find it or I may not. That's faith healing. But if I know exactly where the switch is, I come in and I switch it on every single time. There's no fumbling. And that's the spiritual healing that I'm talking about. It starts with God. God never fails. Never. So that is, it's not miraculous. It's not.
I'm sure a number of people will be interested in steps to achieve this this pattern, if you like. There's a pattern that is established. You walk into a dark room, you know where the switch is, and you go, you turn it on.
Yeah.
Okay? Maybe you should begin to talk about that.
Yes. Of course, I wouldn't say this is how God heals, because that places one in the position of God. But what I will say is, when we start with God, now the question is, what is God to us? For many of us, without being aware, we tend to make God in our own image. If I am this way, that means that's what God is. But if we start with what God is, and whether we're, of faith or not of faith, we must accept that God is spirit. He's invisible to the 5 material senses which you first started talking about. And if God is spirit, and if he has created us, because that is the premise is important, the premise on which spiritual healing is based, then man is spiritual too. And it takes a desire to think out of the conventional box of, that we've been brought up with. Dr. Dada mentioned African traditional medicine. In the olden days, especially in Africa, people would say, oh, you're ill because there's some spiritual, although it was, shrouded in superstition, but there was an acknowledgement that it doesn't all start and end with materiality, which is what Materia Medica talks about. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everyone is free to make their choice.
Yes.
But in spiritual healing, you start with God, you stay there, you stay with the basis, start from the basis that man or woman, I'm using it generically, is spiritual.
It's spiritual.
And
Right.
if you start that way and you find that you can be healed, not only once but consistently, then it's worth looking
All
into.
right. Okay. I would like you to still pull some thoughts together, but let me ask Dr. Dada, have you heard that many of the diseases do have their roots in negative emotional situations?
Sure.
Can you explain that?
Now, there are some instances they call them, I think, IEIs, emotionally induced illnesses, sorry, EII, emotionally induced illnesses. And those that part of medicine actually is related to the mental health. Now you find a situation whereby someone tends to maybe sad, tends to affect the physical system of the body, can affect the way the acid in the stomach produces. The person can have ulcer.
So just by having negative thoughts,
Negative thoughts.
your body can begin to react
the body can
negatively.
it can affect the body, and that's why when it comes to the aspect of healing, even in medicine, you talk about psychotherapy, talking to people, getting them, helping them out. That is actually seen more in mental health. That's why we call it mental health, as it starts with the mind, the brain. Then it tends to have effect on other parts of the body. Emotionally induced illnesses.
It means that there is a connection
Sure.
between...
In fact, yes, there's this Harvard initiative, and you probably are aware of it. It's been, you know, they've been on it for over 40 years, where the medical faculty, and this isn't just psychologists and psychiatrists, the entire medical faculty, has committed significant sums of money to investigate how a person's state of thinking or their state of thought affects their physical health. And they are finding that it does. In fact, there is the placebo effect, where a person takes an unmedicated pill, but they believe that it's medicated, and they get well. And it was so interesting that I realized that, recent studies show that 65% of patients are helped using an unmedicated pill because they believe.
Is that substantiated?
Medicated. Yes.
Okay.
65%.
I was shocked at that.
One of the foremost psychiatrists ever produced in Africa is Dr. Lambo. And there was a time Dr. Lambo actually admitted that the unorthodox way of managing mentally challenged people, that those that we classify as maybe herbalists, they made significant progress in managing neurosis compared to the psychiatrist in the four walls of the hospital. Now, the only thing I have, maybe technically not against, well, a kind of a different view. At a point in time, I feel it sounds contradictory, because when you use the word God, faith must be there, because you are dealing with someone you're not seeing. So I don't feel healing can come without faith, and that is the miraculous part. Now, if I can go outside medicine a little and have a quotation from the good books, it says that without faith it's impossible to please God. He that comes to God must believe that he is, and is a rewarder of them who diligently seek him. Now, what I feel is that the aspect of bringing about healing is predicated on God. When you come to the hospital, you have headache, I will give you analgesics. It works. The moment it doesn't work, I start questioning. Am I sure you're actually having headache? Now, for someone who wants to receive healing from God on a consistent basis and no praise, it means that if it's not going to be based on faith, it's going to be based on a kind of a mantra. And the mantra will state that, okay, if you pray for a certain number of hours, it means you must be healed.
No, I think you misunderstood. I didn't say it doesn't depend on faith. I said it doesn't depend on blind faith. There's a difference. Blind faith is, oh, it happened for you, it may not happen for me, or it even happened for me now, it may not happen for me again. I didn't say. I said faith is an integral part of healing. I said that. So maybe, there's that misunderstanding.
Okay.
I'm talking about spiritual understanding, which is based on faith. You start with faith. Let me give you something, really, a parallel that's easy. A child, so, you teach a child, 2 + 2 = 4. They take it on faith. And then they begin to prove it and faith becomes understanding. It's, it's just a parallel. So you get
I
what I'm
think
saying.
that sounds good.
Yeah, just so that you get what I'm trying to say. Faith is an integral part. The child whom you say 2 + 2 = 4 and doesn't listen before they understand will never know it. They first take it on faith. Yeah, okay, teacher or mom or dad has said it's equal to 4, I will accept it. Then they begin to prove it for themselves. You give them 2 sweets and somebody else gives them 2 sweets and they find that what they have is 4 sweets. They're beginning to understand. So faith is an integral part of spiritual healing.
All right, good. I want you to talk about well-being. Because the reason I brought up the issue of your thought process is because I realized that in various studies, people have talked about that being connected to your general well-being, which is also connected to spiritual healing. So I want you to make a pattern out of that.
Okay. In spiritual healing, there's a distinction made between God's thoughts, because well, I am a Christian, so I can quote the Bible, but it doesn't mean it's limited to Christianity.
You say to me, what if I wasn't a Christian? What if I believed in Hindu?
Yes.
So explain it in such a way that everyone understands.
I would say to the Hindu man, do you accept that man is spiritual? The Hindu man probably does.
Of course.
I can't hold brief, but they will. And I say, if you accept that you're spiritual, if you accept that there is a divinity, then, and if you are seeking well-being and healing, then, this is for you. It starts by acknowledging that man is spiritual. That is the premise,
Now, once you've understood that, so what's the next? Where do you go to?
You study. Well, I would study the works of Jesus Christ. And I don't really want to, talk about one faith or the other. But spiritual healing has been around for very many years.
And yet
It's
thousands
not
of years.
Thousands of years. It's not something that I am, talking about. I'm just presenting it. It is, if people are finding that it works, then the public must be aware that they can also make that choice and make it intelligently, not make it, with a sense of all hope is lost, and then we turn to it as a last resort, because at least that should sound familiar. Oh, there's no more medicine can do, you see, and then they say, okay, we'll go to see, some spiritual person, whether it's a pastor or a babalawo, or, people will then turn to it as a last resort. But when what you consider fixed in fact fails, you turn to something that you must feel is higher, why not turn to it in the first place?
I like to ask a question, but sorry, I'll come to you. When you talk about spiritual healing, and you talk about healing from God, now God may be God to different people. God may mean God to different people in different ways. Now, to the African tradition, God may be Ogun. Yes. To some family, their God may be one idol. That's when they say God, that's who they refer to. Now, so maybe there should be some form of clear distinction. The source of this spiritual healing
is God as spirit. It says acquaint yourself with him. Get to know who God is. That sometimes takes humility. I can say, oh, well, I've been, from the cradle, I've been taught about God. But if I decide, I desire to understand God better, I believe, and this is personal, that if you desire it, that's what you will get. I desire to understand better. All right, somebody says, oh, okay, so there's spiritual healing. I really want to know what it's about. Because I start from the standpoint that God is real, I'm willing, I'm very happy to say that if such a person desires, I want to understand this better, God will make them
Well,
understand
in all
it better.
religions, I think they all there seem to be this common understanding that there is a supreme being.
Yes, and it's
that
not an
controls,
idol.
Yes,
It's
that
not
controls.
it's not
the
a
affairs.
graven
Okay,
image.
now, Dr. Dada, since you've heard and you've seen, you call it emotionally induced illness. Okay, there is a connection between your thought processes and maybe the way you feel. When you talk about diseases, those, you know, you use the word illness. It may sound very light. You know, do you think there are emotionally induced diseases, even like cancer?
Well, in some certain cases, research is still ongoing when it comes to the state of mind with respect to what comes out of the body. Is still in process. But be that as it may, when it comes to individual diseases or illnesses, especially cancer, what brings about cancer is still unknown. It's called idiopathic because one cell out of the millions of cells in the body just go crazy and will start replicating itself.
And you don't know what could cause that cell
to go crazy at
go
that point
crazy.
in time. There are different postulations presently, and those things are still under research. They are. And that's why I use one word, idiopathic. When we come to the level of medicine, idiopathic means cause unknown.
Okay.
That's the meaning of idiopathic. So medicine too can conveniently hide under that umbrella.
So medicine recognizes that there are certain things you cannot explain.
Oh, no. Usually there is something you should get. Medicine does not come to tell you everything. Are you getting me? And that's why between 18th century and now, lots of research work is still ongoing. And that's why where medicine was 100 years ago is not where it is today. Where medicine will be in 100 years' time is not where it is right
So
now.
research will continue
Research
to
is
drive,
ongoing, and
drive its development.
and that's why you find out a situation where someone will come, you can easily hand over to the generation that is coming. There is a process. There are certain steps. This is how you go about it. And that's why when I was in clinical year and I was reading surgery, there is this illustration that was given that it's as if you are standing on the shoulders of a giant. Because when your son enters medical school today, your son is actually privileged to read what people had done many years before. So at that point in time, he is standing on the shoulders of giants to study more.
Okay.
So
But I must also let you know that in every other form of practice, there are documentations. Okay, there is the 7 books of Moses. There are documentations that can be transferred from generation to generation. But I was going to ask you to tell us what you think is responsible for. Okay, let me put it like this. You talk about spiritual healing coming from God, and it can be practiced by anyone, whatever your religion. Okay? Do you think that there is also a place for morality?
Yes,
A
absolutely.
place for evil, where evil also has a negative role to play in all of this process?
Okay, I will address that. But let me just, he spoke about a cause. We don't know the cause. In spiritual healing, God is seen to be the only cause and not to cause disease. So you see, it begins to sap disease at its very root. If God is the only cause and he has not caused disease, then the disease that you seem to be exhibiting is illegitimate spiritually. These are ways to begin to experience spiritual healing. And there are, I'm sure, numerous people who have found healing even from cancer through spiritual healing, even attested by the medical faculty. I know someone who, was in Canada, and And, you know.
Well, I just saw the lights.
Okay, all right.
Well, a different light.
Okay, okay.
Let's take a break now.
All right.
We'll be right back. The program is Daytime Talk.
Little Olafisoye prays Oluwasegun. A 3-year-old boy needs your help. At a year and a half, it was discovered that he had a hole in his heart.
1.5 years ago, I would be noticed that my child will be bending down. Even though in their school they'll be complaining, but that this boy is bending down, but I don't know. But like July last month, so we see him, if he wanted to walk, it will be wave. So sometimes we carry her and put milk on her mouth.
Today, Praise cannot stand for long and he is gradually losing his strength, and there is an urgent need to save his life with the sum of 1.5 million naira for treatment in India.
Went to Lasso General Hospital. So that was on the 20th October. They detected that there's hole in her heart, and I need 1.5 million to carry this boy to India. So, and I don't have any money. I want Nigeria to help me, to calm my head. I don't want this boy to die. So Nigeria should help me, please.
This is appealing to Nigerians to help save Praise life by donating to account name Olafisoye Praise Oluwasegun, account number 3065255475, Bank First Bank. The life you save today may well be yours tomorrow.
Went to town earlier in the day to find out what people think or what they know, what they understand about spiritual healing, and this is what we found.
Healing has to do with the removal of ailments by spiritual power. And we know that the devil can counterfeit healing, can counterfeit the things of God. So definitely we're talking of spiritualists that can actually heal. That one is there. And of course, you know that even the so-called herbalist who uses the herbs and all that kind of thing, conjure spirits to bring about healing, is very possible. So I mean, I read about a particular spiritualist who have been to India, who have been around the world, who actually can heal people, their headache and all that. And of course, there are some kind of healing where you can actually touch some parts of your body and it's healed without using the conventional orthodox drugs and medicine.
When your heart, when your spirit is connected with God's spirit, and as a result, that your heart desire, that area you are believing God for a change, for a turnaround, it can be health, it can be financially, then spiritual healing will take place.
If we are talking about this spiritual healing, it begins from Jesus Christ. When he died, he said, by his stripes we are healed. And the moment you believe in Jesus Christ, the healing, I mean, they are just like a bread, a shackles of bread. It's more than that. So I, as a Christian, I so much believe in spiritual healing because God himself is spirit. And whatsoever is impossible for a man and he does it, it becomes spiritual.
When you talk of medically, they will tell you they only care. They can't heal. They can only treat. But the real healing is from the Lord himself.
There are some sicknesses and diseases that people have. And such sicknesses and diseases have defied all medical odds. So if one can trust God for healing, you can pray in your house, you can go to church, whichever one. I believe in spiritual healing. People are still being healed today in so many ways. Cancer, HIV, all sorts of ailments are being healed miraculously.
I believe only God heals, and He's the only one that has the power to take or give.
It's only Jesus Christ that can give us spiritual healing. He healed so many people in the Bible. He healed the woman of issue of blood, number one. He healed the Naaman that was leprosy. He had a leprosy, and by the grace of the Almighty God, he was healed spiritually without using any drug.
Spiritual healing is real. Although some people are now capitalizing on it to do a kind of RNG healing. But when we're talking about real men of God, their spiritual healing is real.
Well, laughing there. The RNG healing was what caught me laughing. Now, you would realize that people out there talk about spiritual healing. Most of them talk from a certain dimension. Jesus Christ, God. Okay, Dr. Darida, why you respond to that? The Babalawo that also heals. Okay, what's the source?
Now I can't answer that question.
Okay, you don't know.
And that's why when we started this discourse, I used the word miracle, and I used the word when there is a certain disease and there is a miracle and the disease is out of the way, I can't explain how it happened. So it is miracle. And because it's a fact that this person was sick and now the person is whole, a smart man does not argue fact. Now, we just fall down and say, that's miracle. Because medicine cannot explain how it happened. Now, I'm not against healing. And one thing that we should get is because in medicine, there is explanation step by step on how things should be done. Step by step, well documented. But when it comes to spiritual healing, and I will take it beyond Jesus Christ. Now, before Jesus Christ, people come and they heal. After Jesus Christ, even today, when people go to herbalist's place, they get healed. They get healed. If they are not healed, they won't patronize the herbalist. Now, whether the herbalist is of a different spirit or not, whether those who go to church, that's why we're talking about spiritual healing generally. Now, the fact remains that we can't explain it. And what we do is to try and explain what we have the ability to explain. And that's why I use the word miracle too when we started.
Okay. I would like you to respond to that, but I remember that before we went on that break, you were actually on the line of thought. And I'd asked, what about the place of morality, in all of this?
I think that's excellent, because Dr. Dada mentioned that if you have a headache and come to him, he'll give you an analgesic. In spiritual healing, because it is spiritualizing thought, even though the analgesic may work in 30 minutes, I don't know. Spiritual healing, it takes a while sometimes to unlearn what you have learned. It may take, a day or longer, or it may be instantaneous. But it not only heals the headache, it heals if in spiritualizing thought, you become a better person. Where before I was, I got angry quickly. As I'm learning more about God, learning more about man and my relationship to him, maybe I cease to be so angry. These are some of the additional effects of spiritual healing. The physical part is the merest of it. It makes a man or woman better. So it would improve the species morally too. Spiritual healing doesn't leave us where it met us. If and I speak from experience, if I'm praying, prayer is beneficial. Prayer isn't only to make my finger better. Prayer primarily is to make me understand God better and my relationship to him. And certainly that must make me a better woman. You know, if I have been dwelling in unforgiveness, and I'm learning that, you know, to love my neighbor as myself, and most faiths talk about that, the golden rule, then I begin to find, oh, I can actually choose to forgive. That comes about as one seeks spiritual healing. So, yes, it does have an effect on morality.
I still need to ask you this. When you listened to the Vox Pop, there was someone who talked about the devil.
Yes.
The devil, we know the devil can do this, but God is able to do this. Do you believe in the reality of the devil?
No.
And you don't believe in the reality of the devil?
And let me explain.
I think that question is very important.
I know, and that's why...
You don't believe that there is a being called the devil?
I believe, or let me say, I know that people believe that there is a devil, and that the devil can do evil. But to start from the basis of God, the question I would ask is, do we accept that God is all? Do we accept that he's omnipotent? Do we? I mean, if we don't, then we can say we don't. But most people tend to say God is all power.
You know, the university I went to, I had friends who were members of, sorry to say, of the
Yes,
cult.
let me just land
and I knew how they operated and some of the things that they did and some spiritual realities that they got involved in.
Okay, so let me
and so that's when you say you don't believe in the reality of the devil.
No.
Okay, I think that is a very important turning point
yes.
in this discussion.
I agree.
So.
Let me back it up. And again, because I'm of the Christian faith, I will use Christian, you know. In the Bible, the first chapter of Genesis ends with God saw everything that he had made, and it was very good. Everything, and it was very good. Elsewhere, in one of the books called Habakkuk, it says, God is of purer eyes than to behold evil.
Okay.
So,
so that is important. So it's not for you to say once you have a problem, it's your neighbor or your grandmother in the village or someone who you call a witch or a wizard.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, if that's what you think, or even if you think it's the devil, if you take away the belief that the devil has power by accepting that God has all power, then the basis of that disease is eroded. If someone comes to me and says, I am going to kill you because I have some power, and I say, all power belongs to God, and God's power is entirely good. Okay. I've disarmed the person.
Dr. Darida, do you believe in that the devil, there's a being called that people popularly refer to as the devil? You may have another description for it. I believe in all religions, even in Ogun, they call it a name. They have a name for it. In various, they seem to have a description of some negative being, like you have for a positive supreme being.
You're very right. At this point in time, I'll have to put on a little toga of spirituality, and that is going to be embedded in the fact that Bible says in Genesis chapter 3 that devil came to tempt Adam and Eve. Now that means that God himself did not lie in delusion. I think anybody that does not believe devil exists is actually deluding himself. There is the devil. Okay,
let's benefit from this issue of spiritual healing in the next couple of minutes. Now, if you want to practice spiritual healing, what do you do? As in, you want to make it a part of your lifestyle so that you don't have to visit people like Dr. Dada all the time.
Well, I would say undertake the study of who God is, but go to the books that really...
Which books?
The Bible. I've never read the Quran, so I can't really. But wherever
but
God
for a general mind, the Bible, the Quran.
Wherever God is presented as spirit, Because, you know, even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, initially, the Israelites didn't get that sense of God as spirit. It was something they, you know, that approached. It rose higher and higher, you know. Study. The Bible says, acquaint yourself with God. Get to know who God is. And start from the basis of God, not the basis of man. You know, let's get to begin to understand, who is this God that I say is the cause of all that is, and that cause is good? Who is this God that I say has no opposite? Because the infinite cannot have an opposite. That is, it's just a fact. What is the opposite of infinity? Infinity has no opposite. What is the opposite of all? All has no opposite.
I want to ask you this. What's Spiritism?
Spiritism is not spiritual healing. Spiritism, borders on things like necromancy, where they, think you can communicate with the dead, or, people hold seances, and it's totally, Spiritism believes in many spirits all floating around. No. Spiritual healing starts with the one spirit. That one spirit.
You talked about seances.
Yeah.
That's just a polished word for coven or witchcraft meetings.
Okay.
They say seances, this will take us into some real spiritual issues. But again, like you have said, you have to know that there is one supreme God.
And that he's all powerful.
And is all powerful.
Because if we start from the sense that, well, God has all power, but there's something else that has a power that will tussle with God, then we begin to limit God. Okay. Like the Israelites did when he said, I will furnish a table for you in the wilderness.
Because of time, I want Dr. Daridada you may have some thoughts you like to express. I haven't heard all the things you heard. Maybe you do it now.
What I would like to say is that this is actually very broad, and I think at this point in time, maybe you'll have brought people of other faiths to explain the process of healing and how they believe in healing. Maybe it will have been a kind of better platform for me to talk, because this is actually deeply spiritual. Then, be that as it may, I think in this part of the world, in Africa, one of the best ways to enjoy sound health is actually to get connected to God. I have to say that as a medical doctor, because our health system is not good. The ratio of doctor to patients is very wide. Nigeria is still managing with ratio 1 to 4,000, and the standard for developing countries is ratio 1 to 600. And in the past 2 years, over 2,000 doctors have left the shores of Nigeria, and the health indices in the country is actually poor. For someone who is smart, get connected to God, God can actually heal. How he goes about healing, I can't explain.
Okay.
But
you seem to like that.
Well, I do. I mean, it's not unusual to hear doctors in Africa, Nigeria, acknowledge, God. And for me, that is,
in developed world, they also have issues, medical issues.
Yes.
But
what I would say to what Dr. Dada said is, don't necessarily seek spiritual healing because the medical faculty in Nigeria is having problems. Seek it because you want to understand God better. You understand your relationship to him. Seek it for God's sake and for the sake of man.
All right, thank you very much. Like he said, it's very broad, and
Yes.
If you must seek it, you must be willing to pay the price, to study and to be committed to the process. But let's leave it there today, and maybe we'll do something relating to that some other time. I've been speaking with Dr. Daridada, a medical practitioner, and Mojisola Sholanke of the Church of Christ Scientists on this very broad issue. My name is Emmanuel Ere. See you next time.